What if I told you that Alabama's biggest disaster might actually be the catalyst for their greatest comeback story? Hold on to your crimson jerseys, because what happened after that shocking Week 1 loss is about to flip everything you thought you knew about this Tide team upside down. Subscribe now for the inside scoop. Before we dive deep into this roller coaster analysis, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because I'm bringing you the most explosive Alabama football content that the mainstream media won't tell you. This channel is your direct line to the truth about Crimson Tide football, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The shocking truth about Alabama's season. Paul Finebaum just dropped a statement that's got the entire college football world talking, and it's either pure genius or complete madness. After watching Alabama get absolutely demolished 31-17 by an unranked Florida State team in Week 1, sending shockwaves through the fanbase and having everyone calling for Kalen DeBoer's job before the season even got rolling, Finebaum stood up and declared that Alabama is actually fine. Not just okay, not just recovering, but legitimately fine and ready to dominate.
The evidence.
An absolutely ruthless 73-0 destruction of Louisiana Monroe, followed by a commanding 38-14 victory over Wisconsin that had everyone remembering why Alabama football strikes fear into opponents nationwide. Finebaum said it perfectly on SportsCenter when he stated they're actually fine, acknowledging that while beating Monroe 73-0 and taking down Wisconsin might seem like expected results, this team is looking razor-sharp and DeBoer clearly figured out whatever went wrong in that opener. But here's where it gets absolutely terrifying for every Alabama fan out there. Joel Klatt from Fox Sports dropped a reality bomb that should have every Tide supporter losing sleep at night. Despite all the positive momentum and the way this team bounced back with authority, that Florida State loss created a situation where Alabama now has zero margin for error moving forward.
Zero.
Not a little wiggle room, not a small cushion, but absolutely nothing. Klatt put it in terms that cut straight to the bone when he explained that for all the positive feelings Alabama could gain by responding to critics and controlling their effort level, they're still completely against the wall because of Week 1. The brutal truth is that one more stumble could completely derail not just the season, but potentially DeBoer's entire future in Tuscaloosa.
The gauntlet that'll define everything.
What's coming next is going to separate the pretenders from the champions, and it's honestly terrifying to think about. Alabama is staring down the barrel of 4 consecutive ranked opponents, with 6 of their next 7 games coming against teams that are currently ranked. The only unranked opponent in that stretch is South Carolina, and even that game is on the road in what's always a hostile environment. The first test in this absolute gauntlet comes September 27th at 7:30 p.m. when Alabama travels to face the number 5 ranked Georgia Bulldogs in Athens. This isn't just another game. This is the moment that will determine whether this team is truly back or if those dominant victories were just beating up on inferior competition. Georgia is always a nightmare matchup, and playing between the hedges with zero margin for error makes this feel like a playoff elimination game in late September. The deep dive into what makes this Alabama team different. Let's talk about what's really happening behind the scenes in Tuscaloosa, because there are layers to this story that most people aren't seeing. When Kalen DeBoer took over from Nick Saban, he inherited not just a program, but a dynasty with expectations that would crush most coaches before they even stepped on the field. The weight of following a legend who won 6 national championships at Alabama is something that can't be measured, and that Florida State loss felt like the entire Saban era was crashing down in real time. But here's what's fascinating about DeBoer's response. Instead of panicking or making dramatic wholesale changes, he went back to Alabama fundamentals while implementing his own offensive philosophy. The 73-0 demolition of Louisiana Monroe wasn't just about scoring points, it was about establishing an identity. This team put up over 600 total yards of offense while the defense pitched a shutout that reminded everyone why Alabama defense is still the gold standard in college football. The X factors that could define this season. The quarterback situation under DeBoer is absolutely critical to understand. Jalen Milroe is playing with a confidence and precision that we haven't seen from an Alabama quarterback in years. His development from last season to now is night and day, and if he can maintain this level of play against elite competition, Alabama becomes a completely different animal. Milroe's dual threat ability combined with Alabama's traditionally dominant running game creates matchup nightmares that even Georgia and Tennessee will struggle to contain. But let's talk about the elephant in the room that nobody wants to address. This Alabama roster is absolutely loaded with NFL talent, arguably more than any team in the country. The offensive line is anchored by players who will be playing on Sundays, the receiving core has the depth and talent to match up with anyone, And don't even get me started on a defense that's been restocked with five-star recruits who are hungry to prove they belong in the Alabama legacy. The historical context that changes everything. Here's something that should terrify every team on Alabama's schedule. In the Saban era, Alabama's most dominant seasons often came after early adversity. Remember 2017 when they lost to Auburn in the regular season and then went on to win the national championship? Or 2015 when they had that shocking loss to Ole Miss and then steamrolled everyone in their path? This program has a DNA of responding to criticism and doubt with an almost supernatural level of focus and intensity. DeBoer understands this culture better than anyone gives him credit for. He didn't just take the Alabama job, he studied the Alabama way for months before arriving. The way this team has bounced back isn't just coaching, it's tapping into something deeper that exists in Tuscaloosa. When Alabama gets written off or doubted, they become a different level of dangerous. The recruiting domination that's still paying dividends. Let's not forget that Alabama has been recruiting at an elite level for over a decade, and that talent pipeline doesn't just disappear overnight. The depth chart is filled with former five-star recruits who are finally getting their chance to shine, and the competition for playing time is so intense that it elevates everyone's performance. When your third-string linebacker was the top recruit in his state and your backup running back was choosing between Alabama and Ohio State, you have a different level of talent than 99% of college football. This recruiting advantage becomes even more important when you're facing that brutal SEC schedule. While other teams might have to worry about depth and injuries, Alabama can rotate fresh talent that would be starters at most other programs. That kind of depth is what separates championship teams from good teams, and it's something that Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU all have to account for when game planning. The verdict that could change everything. Here's my honest assessment of where this team stands right now, and it's more complex than most people realize. Yes, Alabama showed incredible character and mental toughness by responding to that devastating opener with such dominant performances, and that tells us the Alabama DNA is still alive and well in that locker room. DeBoer clearly made the necessary adjustments and got his players to buy in completely, which is exactly what championship coaches do when their backs are against the wall. However, we cannot fool ourselves into thinking that demolishing weaker opponents proves we're ready to run the table through the SEC gauntlet. Georgia is going to show us exactly where this team really stands, and if Alabama can go into Athens and beat the Bulldogs convincingly, then I'll be ready to say this team is legitimately back and ready to compete for championships. But if they stumble against Georgia, the pressure on DeBoer is going to come back 10 times stronger than it was after Week 1. The reality is that this team is walking a tightrope with no safety net, but they're walking that tightrope with more talent, more depth, and more championship experience than almost any team in the country. Every single snap from here on out could determine whether this season becomes a redemption story or a cautionary tale about how quickly things can fall apart in college football, but the pieces are all there for something special to happen in Tuscaloosa.
The championship mindset that never left Tuscaloosa.
What separates Alabama from every other program in college football isn't just talent or coaching, it's the championship expectation that permeates every aspect of the program. When you walk through the Alabama football facility, you're surrounded by national championship trophies, Heisman Trophy winners, and NFL draft picks that remind everyone what the standard is in Tuscaloosa. That culture doesn't disappear when one coach leaves and another arrives, it gets passed down like a sacred tradition. DeBoer inherited players who have been recruited with the promise of competing for national championships, not conference titles or bowl games. These players came to Alabama specifically because they wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves, and that mentality is showing up in how they've responded to adversity. The leadership from veteran players who remember what it felt like to win at the highest level is invaluable, and you can see it in how this team has rallied after that opening loss.
The Saban Shadow and DeBoer's masterstroke.
Let's address the massive elephant in the room that everyone's thinking about, but nobody wants to say out loud. Following Nick Saban at Alabama is like trying to follow John Wooden at UCLA or Vince Lombardi with the Packers. The comparison is inevitable, and the pressure is suffocating. But DeBoer has done something brilliant that most people are missing. Instead of trying to be Nick Saban, he's building on the foundation Saban created while implementing his own innovative offensive system. The way Alabama has been moving the ball under DeBoer is different from the Saban era, but it's still unmistakably Alabama football. The power running game is still there, the suffocating defense is still intact, but now there's an explosive passing attack that can stretch the field in ways that make this offense more dynamic and unpredictable. When you combine DeBoer's offensive creativity with Alabama's traditional defensive dominance, you get a team that's harder to game plan against than ever before. The transfer portal wins that nobody's talking about. While everyone focuses on high school recruiting, Alabama has been quietly dominating the transfer portal in ways that could be the difference between a good season and a championship season. The additions through the portal haven't just filled roster spots, they've added veteran leadership and specific skill sets that complement Alabama's existing talent perfectly. These transfer additions bring something that five-star high school recruits can't: immediate college experience and the hunger that comes from wanting to prove they belong at Alabama. When you combine that veteran presence with the incredible young talent that Alabama consistently recruits, you get a roster that is both the ceiling of elite recruits and the floor of experienced players who know how to win games.
Join the conversation. Your voice matters.
I want to hear exactly what you think about this situation because Alabama fans always have the most passionate and insightful takes in college football. Do you believe this team is truly back and ready to dominate, or are you worried that those big wins were just false hope against inferior competition? Can you trust DeBoer to navigate this brutal schedule with zero room for mistakes? And do you think Alabama still has a legitimate shot at the national championship despite that opening loss? Here's what I specifically want to know from the Crimson Tide faithful. Which upcoming game on this brutal schedule worries you the most, and why? Are you more concerned about Georgia's defense, Tennessee's home field advantage, or LSU's ability to play spoiler in Death Valley? Do you think DeBoer's offensive system is the missing piece that puts Alabama over the top, or are you worried about the defense maintaining the Saban standard? Drop your predictions in the comments below because I read every single one and I love debating Alabama football with the most knowledgeable fanbase in the sport. Tell me if you think this team can survive the Georgia test and run through Tennessee, LSU, and the rest of this murderous schedule, or if you're already worried about what happens if they stumble again. And don't forget to share which Alabama players you think are going to be the X factors in these big games because I have some theories that might surprise you. Subscribe for more in-depth Alabama coverage that goes beyond the surface-level analysis. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the latest Crimson Tide updates, and remember that no matter what happens, we bleed crimson and white forever. This channel is your home for Alabama football content that digs deeper than anyone else, and I promise you'll get insights and analysis that you won't find anywhere else. Roll Tide, and let's see if this team can turn disaster into destiny while proving that the Alabama standard never truly left Tuscaloosa.